This is You the People. Each week, we three Canadians talk about you, the people, your politics, your political system, your home stretch campaign strategies, and yes, your upcoming election. And with me, as always, Corey Hogan and Stephen Carter. Guys, what is going on?
I'm pretty excited. I'm doing a deep dive in data. I'm ready to make my call on election night now as I scan through all of the precincts that are reporting and the state's results. I am so ready for this. I'm very excited.
You do realize you don't need to... Yeah, go ahead, Corey.
Well, I just think that there's going to be campaigns throwing money at you to not get the nod from the Stephen Carter decision desk, given your track record in this area.
Hey,
okay, good. We were going to say the same thing. So I'm glad you went, Corey.
That's good.
I'm glad you went.
You know, you guys have no confidence in me at all. It's very upsetting. It's very
fair.
upsetting.
To be fair, that's well-earned no confidence. This is not no confidence for no reason.
I nailed the last predictions in the last strategist episode. Nailed them.
I need to talk to you about your spreadsheet here. It's color-coded, so that's a start.
Yeah.
It's taken from other places, and then there's this one there's just 50, of course, there's 50 rows, and then there's a final column that says Carter's thoughts, and all it says is in one of the rows, it says highly likely to go Dem. So thank you, Carter, for your unbelievable analysis on this spreadsheet. I just want to point out that is all you've written on the spreadsheet.
Jackass. You know, I have to go through and actually analyze. I'm putting the data in. There's a lot of data here, and then you have to look at it, and I've only got one state that I feel 100% confident about. So
yeah, North Carolina, highly likely to go Dem.
Yeah, see, guaranteed now.
Guaranteed North Carolina.
The Senate.
Congratulations to the Republican Tillis for winning in North Carolina. Our first call of election night made right here. We're going to make it early, but we're going to make it accurately. That's our rule. Early and accurate. And this is...
I'm willing to predict that anybody who has sexting or a sex tape in this election is going to win. Throwing it out there, right? The Bidens, Cunningham, both of them have sexting scandals. They're both going to win. I've just said
clarify. Just to clarify, the Bidens is the plural on the
family. The family. I mean, if one of them's got a sex tape, they've all got sex tapes.
What kind of family are you running there, Carter?
That's a very. You should talk to Glenn Greenwald. Probably wants to publish an article with some of your quotes. Just to let you. That's a very inside. It's very inside.
I have many regrets.
Term. Speaking of election night, Carter, do you have an announcement to throw out there?
Well, I'm telling you, we're going to do a live election show unless Corey fucks it up. So there is a 50-50 chance that we're going to have a live election show. We're very excited. Very excited.
It's like 40-60, I would say. But let Carter know whether you think this is a good idea or a bad idea.
Everybody would watch. Everybody's going to watch our show.
Yeah, there's nothing else competing with it. I like that.
We can watch Zane's show. We can watch Zane's show and shit on him about his analysis. I mean, this is really what we're here for. Have you heard his bio? He's the political strategy and campaign team member for U.S. President Barack Obama, Senator Elizabeth Warren, NDP leader Rachel Notley, and Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi. This guy is great. Why are you a strategist? You have never won anything, Corey. And Zain, who's like involved in everything, is the fucking host? We've got this all backwards.
Let me tell you something. Here's the ultimate political strategy for anyone wanting to get in. Go an inch deep. No one will know. No one will know what exactly you've done.
Are you describing your lovemaking technique or what? I'm very confused.
This is the
I don't like this. I'm uncomfortable.
Corey's eyes are now closed. Corey just does not even know how to respond.
Should we do headlines?
I just wanted to tire you out, but okay. Corey, did you want to say anything about the live show before I move to headlines?
Nothing at all, Zain. Nothing.
Let's move into the headlines. Guys, are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Corey's once again not
He's
ready.
not even talking anymore.
So I'm going to start with you. Corey, this comes to us from Fox News. Tucker Carlson says damning Hunter Biden documents suddenly vanish. Your thoughts?
I think that if I have what is potentially election-changing news about one of the candidates' sons, I don't know why that would be election-changing news, but maybe I wouldn't just mail it to myself across the country without taking a photocopy. Like, this is
oh my God,
this is pretty amazing. And then to actually go on the television and say, "Hey, listen, I had this, and it's very suspicious it didn't show up," is pretty incredible.
Carter, I know you've been involved in several campaigns mailing documents across countries. Have you ever had documents vanish? Top secret, only one copy, opposition research. Has it just disappeared on you?
Oh, yeah, many, many times. I mean, I often mail my own documents to myself. I try and do it when I'm several provinces away. What I have done, I actually drove to Quebec once so I could mail something back to myself. It was unbelievably, Canada Post actually delivered it. It was very disappointing. But this was Tucker Carlson ever respected? I was thinking about that today. Is this a step down for him, or is this exactly where we've had him since his bow tie wearing days?
Well, I was trying to think about that too. Like, did we take him seriously in the 90s or not? I can no longer remember.
I thought we did on Crossfire. Did we not? Like when he was in that mid 2000s Crossfire days, and then Stewart around that time when they just got canceled a couple months later. I thought we took him seriously, but I don't remember.
Yeah, it seems long ago. Long ago.
Our next headline comes to us from Politico. The White House's Science Policy Office has ranked ending COVID-19 atop the list of the president's top first-term accomplishments. Carter, I know you will agree, but please elaborate with some flowery language about how Donald Trump has come to the rescue of America.
Listen, I'm not here to argue with scientists, right? If scientists say that it's solved, it's solved. I mean, the 992 people who died today in the United States of America may have something to say about it. The 72,000 or was it 92,000 people who came down with COVID today may have something to say about it. But if the scientists say it's solved, it's solved. I'm a man who believes in listening to the scientists. This is a simple politicization of science. It's very gross, and it leans towards propaganda, as everything has in the last 4 years.
Corey?
Yeah, he ended COVID the way Nixon ended the war in Vietnam. I mean, this is peace with honor with a disease that's killing 200,000 Americans. This is a big joke.
Bush's mission accomplished.
Yeah,
we've got them all done. Yeah,
it's all of the greatest hits to get. Like, none of those are bad anymore. Trump has ruined the bad defeat. The victory declaration that comes with the total failure. He owns that now. That is his brand. The notion that America would literally be having its worst COVID numbers ever in real time as he's declaring the disease has been vanquished is, I mean, I guess it really says something about Donald Trump. He had the disease and got over it. So COVID is over, right? No longer a concern for him, no longer a concern for America. I mean, how this guy continues to actually be in a conversation about 40% support, it's a little crazy to me. But good job, America. Someday I hope we in Canada can meet your standard, vanquishing COVID. Really looking forward to it.
Not only have they vanquished it, Corey, Donald Trump has a distribution plan, which brings us to our next headline from the Wall Street Journal. The Trump administration offered Santa Claus performers a deal. Promote a COVID-19 vaccine and they'd get early access. Look at that, Corey. Not only is it over, but it is so over that there's a vaccine distribution strategy.
Is it you have to go and see the Santa Claus in your mall? Like, I'm not following. Is this...
No, they get the vaccine, and then the
mall
Santas at the mall talk it up.
Get the vaccine first, and for every Timmy that sits on their lap, they ask them what you want for Christmas, and then they talk about the vaccine. What are you not understanding here, Carter? You seem confused.
I don't understand. Don't they have an entire communications structure in the government that they have to go to mall Santas?
Yeah, no,
Is this what I'm understanding?
Listen, American government communications for decades has been built around mall Santas. Show some basic understanding of the facts here.
I'm so embarrassed.
What do you think of
people learned about Obamacare, huh?
What do you think a comms officer
on a television?
How do you think
they went and they sat on a man's lap and they learned some valuable information about healthcare. Okay,
so you're telling me that Matt Wolf is a mall Santa? This is all really making sense to me now.
Now you just mix in your shows. Nobody who's listening to this will know who Matt Wolf is.
Damn it! For a joke for one person.
Carter, not only is that how people learned about Obamacare, that's how they signed up for Obamacare. It was a commission structure from all that. How do you think they earn money? What is wrong with you, Carter?
How do the elves make money? How are the elves involved?
They're not. I don't know. It's just such a weird, stupid question.
They're so fucking racist.
I'm sorry,
they're so fucking racist.
Was Zane's story about how mall Santas and mall elves?
No, but this is the core problem. The racism at the core of this is the problem. I'm pissed.
Don't make light of actual real problems in America here. We're talking about mall Santas, trying to keep it light. Fucking dumbass.
Speaking of dumbass, I had this next headline for you specifically, Carter. Costco, this comes to us from the Chicago Sun-Times. Costco pulling products allegedly made with forced monkey labor. This is ultimate 2020 ultimate 2020 headline. Costco is pulling a certain type of coconut milk after being shamed that the coconuts were being picked by monkeys. This is a product that they have since removed from shelf after tremendous advocacy from groups like PETA. So it's less funny once I actually tell you what it is. But the headline, Stephen Carter, I know you're going to have a hot take on this. And of course, I assume, like Corey and I will just now assume you didn't know about the monkey labor, which of course also runs America.
I am really pissed. I've got coconut milk up in my fridge and I got to go now do some research. Did we get it at Costco? Am I making... Oh, my goodness. Really? Is there no depths to which humanity won't stoop? I mean, first of all, we're watching Tucker Carlson, and now we're enslaving monkeys? Jeez. I'm disappointed.
Corey.
You know
Corey
what?
doesn't keep Corey's fine with it. Corey's fine with it, which is absolutely fine with me.
Those hot dogs, they kept the price of the hot dogs low?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all that matters.
Compromises need to be made.
The membership price has not changed. The hot dogs are still 18 cents. It's still the best deal around the block. We'll leave that there and we'll move it on to our next segment. Our next segment, You Are Bambi on Ice. Guys, I want to talk about what it is like to be a campaign strategist or a campaign manager heading into the period we are right now. We're less than 5 days away. We're at Thursday, elections on Tuesday, to this election. And I want to talk about what the final stretch looks like. I want to talk about what the last, weekend of a campaign looks like. And Stephen, maybe I'll start with you. Give me some broad strokes. We talk about the entire sort of force of a campaign culminating on election day. This campaign has been a little bit different, but maybe give us some of the broad strokes of what a campaign is tooling up for and kind of what a campaign strategist or a campaign director is doing in this final weekend. And maybe we'll kind of explore conversations from there.
Well, I think that this campaign's a little bit different because normally what you'd be seeing is a huge handoff to the GOTV team, and the Get Out the Vote team is going to start pushing out votes and pushing to try and get electors the largest number of electors to the polls as possible. And already we've seen, some 85 million people vote. They handed off to the GOTV chairs a month ago, right? Like they started to do the Get Out the Vote. And there comes a point though in a campaign strategist or campaign manager's campaign when there is this incredible lull. There is nothing left to do. There are no more strategies to execute. There's no more creative to approve. There's no more brochures that need to be need to be approved, or radio ads or immediate television ads. They're all done. They're all in the can. And you're just sitting there going, well, now what? And it's usually around 24 hours before the election. There's one event left. You've got to get your candidate to the polls and have them vote. And they get that picture taken, and I think actually, I'm not sure, but I think that, Biden may have voted already. Anyways, that's kind of the last thing. And that's not actually your job anymore as the campaign strategist or the campaign manager. You're now just waiting for the results to come in. That's when I traditionally do things like try and find, what am I going to be evaluating results by? What am I going to be looking at? Because there's so much data that's going to start flying at you, after 8 o'clock Eastern time, 6 o'clock Pacific or Mountain. Everything's going to start coming in very, very quickly. And you don't know what the data is until you've got comparators. So that's what I would be working on in the last 24 to 48 hours, is just trying to figure out how I'm going to understand if we're in the game or out of the game. And, sometimes the data comes back and it's really good. Other times the data comes back and you've got to pull your concession speech out. So that's what I'm doing.
I'll hold off on Election Day for a second rather than digging deeper on that right now. Corey, tell me what you're doing leading up to Election Day. Carter's mentioned a few items. You're kind of almost in this lull of nothing to do. It's kind of you're in the eye of the storm. Everything around you is moving. Is that fair from your standpoint? And kind of what other texture to that do you want to add?
Well, I don't think we are at what would normally be the eye of the storm yet. We're still a few days out. There's still the final weekend. There's that mad dash where you're effectively scrambling across the country every day, using time zones to your advantage, getting as much done as you can possibly get done. And I don't expect that will change. And there's a fair bit of activity that goes along with that. Now, a couple of things I would say, and I don't know which order I want to throw them on the table, but there's 2 points I want to make here. One is that in the last week, campaigns tend to run against themselves. Discipline really breaks down, and it breaks down for a number of different reasons. It breaks down because idle hands are the devil's playthings, and as Stephen mentioned, certain people's activities will just be done. Like if you're on the advance team, there's nothing to advance past November 3rd, you're going to start getting squirrely. If you're the campaign manager, or if you're having a logistics job, you're no longer planning things really far out. There's kind of nothing to do after a certain point. And that leads to people to start getting anxious about the future. They'll be worried about jobs. Are they going to lose jobs? Are they going to get jobs? What kind of jobs are they going to get? Who do they know? They'll start jockeying for position. They, as a result, often lose focus. And this is when dumb shit happens on campaigns, as a general rule. The last week is where things tend to fall apart, and it's usually your fault. So campaigns really need to ride herd over their volunteers and their staff to maintain discipline in those final moments. If you're the front runner, you don't want to look like you're measuring the drapes. If you're the underdog, you don't want to look like you're already jumping off a sinking ship. Now, usually there's not much to do. Usually we expect the election to conclude on Election Day. I don't believe that people are sitting there having the same problems we normally do in a normal election, because both campaigns seem fairly confident that wake up Wednesday morning, there's still going to be more campaigning to do, or maybe campaigning is the wrong word, lobbying, fighting in the courts. There's a very good chance this is not over on Election Day, and there's a very good chance the campaign is going to need to continue.
Carter, I want to talk about continuity in a second. This term that I mentioned with our segment headline, Bambi on Ice, it's a term that you and I talked about when I was managing a campaign recently, which is this concept of you second guessing yourself, even though you've got years of experience behind you and wisdom and support. Can you talk to me about that a bit more in terms of, campaign managers, to maybe as an extension to Corey's point about idle hands and anxiety around this concept of second guessing and kind of where that plays in and how you've seen it play, and maybe even personally?
Well, you've made a near infinite number of decisions over the last year if you're running a good campaign. Then each one of those decisions has some sort of impact. So it's natural to look back at some of those decisions that you made that in hindsight, you wish that you made them differently. So you're looking back and you're trying to figure out, if I'd done this or if I'd done that, what could go wrong here? What's the consequence of this or what's the consequence of that? Now, you haven't had the time to think about it until today, right? Or not today necessarily, but Saturday, Sunday, Monday, as you're heading up to your Tuesday election, because you've just been flat out. You've been running full tilt. You probably haven't had a day off since early September. The push to this last day has been brutal. And all you've done is lived this campaign. You don't have any life outside of it. There is no balance. There is no capacity to, talking to your family. Other people who aren't living it, you have a very hard time communicating with them. You don't even have a real sense of what regular human beings have been doing for the last 2 months. So you come into this and you start questioning everything. Your mind isn't working like a normal mind. You're exhausted. I mean, you know what it's like if you've gone on a campaign with 4 hours, 3 hours of sleep for weeks. And it plays with you. It takes years off your life. And you see that degradation when when you start to slow down. And one of the ways that I've seen it is social media use. People, if you're looking for symptoms of this exhaustion, look no further. I mean, Corey kind of alluded to this, the mistakes that are going to be made. Those mistakes will be made in the social media sphere. Someone from a campaign, someone relatively high ranking is going to tweet something ridiculously stupid, because they're exhausted and because they're slowing down. Their eyes are off their primary job. It won't be a press secretary. It won't be a communicator. It won't be a spinner. It'll be someone who is doing advance. The head of advance is going to say something, and it's going to absolutely destroy the campaign. That's the problem, because now you're not doing your primary job, right? You're done. So your mind starts to go to other things. That's what I think is the real challenge of these last few days, is this lack of discipline that Corey alludes to, the exhaustion, and the desire to still try and rectify maybe some of those big mistakes that you may have made weeks and days and hours ago.
Corey, I've almost got a personal question for you, to tie into what you want to say. Do you have an example of something you've been a part of that you've kind of felt like you hadn't done in the final week, running against yourself, either out of anxiety or idle hands or anything like that? I'm just kind of curious if you've got any anecdotes or any experiences, or that you've either witnessed or bared witness to.
Oh, I mean, countless, Zain. And I guess one of the things we haven't talked that much about is one of the other major factors in these final days where people start doing stupid things is desperation. And that's where candidates start making some pretty crazy throws as well. And it wouldn't mean very much to our American listeners anyways, but I was once on a campaign where a candidate effectively gave a speech that was so broken that the newspaper printed it verbatim, start to finish, rather than just pulling the quotes, because it just showed a man who had totally lost the thread. And mercifully, that was the online version, and they ultimately replaced it with a print version where you have text limits, and they couldn't run the whole thing. But I have seen people, make bold statements where they will say, "I will resign if this is proven untrue." I have seen people make crazy claims about who they would or would not work with in our Westminster system. It just it's stuff that was never talked about, but you start to feel, okay, it's not happening for me. It's not happening for me. I got to do something. But it doesn't work. I mean, there's a reason it wasn't happening. You didn't come to these tactics before because they're not sensible tactics, but you start to bargain. You start to take odds that you wouldn't normally take. And things can fall apart very quickly. The funny thing is, as we talk about this American election, we're seeing it with Donald Trump. It doesn't resonate because he's Donald Trump, and every day he acts like this. But when you see his speeches right now, when he talks about oh my God, am I going to lose, and the Hunter Biden things that he's throwing out there right now, and
constantly attempting to get it to stick. Yeah,
and it's just not, and nobody cares, and I shouldn't say nobody cares, but it's got very little resonance with swing voters. Doesn't look like it's actually damaging Joe Biden's support at all. And these crazy throws and these crazy accusations, maybe we're just not noticing them as this pretty typical campaign behavior, because his typical campaign behavior is so atypical, right?
Carter, let's talk about this before we move on to Election Day. To Corey's point, suppose you're on a down ticket race right now. It's in Congress or in Senate. So let's say you're not top of the ticket. You're neither Trump or Biden. What is the advice you'd have for someone who's looks like they're going to lose it right now? To Corey's point, is there any value in trying desperation? The argument might be, well, might as well go for it. Might as well try it. What else is going to happen? And worst case, we look like we're unraveling and we lose, and then best case, it lands and it works. But what's the advice you'd give to someone who doesn't look like they're going to make it in this moment in time? Is there any advice to give them? I'm just really curious about that.
Yeah, the advice is you're going to go back to regular life. You're going to go back to your regularly scheduled programming. Do you want to go back to regularly scheduled programming just simply as someone who lost an election, or someone who blew up and destroyed their reputation and destroyed who they were? I mean, everybody who's in the situation of running as a candidate has been able to muster significant community support. That community support will still be there the day after the election, win or lose. What happens, though, is if you choose to blow yourself up, blow up your campaign, that community support erodes immediately. So if you're going to choose to lose, or if you're going to lose, choose to lose with grace, because You need that when you go back to your regularly scheduled programming. And, you know, far more than half of the candidates that are running, I know it's primarily a two-party, you know, system, but there's libertarians, there's Green Party candidates, there's independents. There's already people who lost in the primaries, right? There's far more losers in the system than there are winners. But coming up with a plan to hold your head high, even if you lost, you can run again. You can try something different. You can go for a different level of office. All of those things are still available to you if you hold your head high and if you don't come out of it with a complete implosion. And most of these implosions, I think, will happen at the down ticket, right? I think that they're going to happen at the lower levels. The higher levels have staff that kind of come up to them and say, let's go for a walk. Let's stay away from the cameras for 24 or 48 hours. Someone who loves you should do that for you if you're a candidate in a down ballot race.
Corey, do you agree with that advice?
I think that it's a little simpler than that. These are humans, and to go out in a blaze of glory like that is, there's a day after. You're not actually dying when you lose a campaign, and you've got to be able to walk through your community. You've got to be able to have conversations with people and hold your head high. And if you just take these crazy swings, if you just let your campaign look ridiculous at the end, that could affect you longer term. And I don't think that people who are running for Congress or even Senate in most cases are that interested in looking that bad down the road. You guys, you love Aaron Sorkin. Aaron Sorkin has pulled out a quote a million times, about when the fall, that's all that's left. It matters a great deal, right? You don't want to lose in the most graceless way possible. It's important the day after, both for you and for your party, not to look like a total clown in the lead up to the election.
Corey, I'm going to stick with...
You're quoting Aaron Sorkin. It's the end of the world.
Yeah, from Sports Night, his only good TV show.
Oh,
oh my! So you're just trying to, you're just fucking annoying, man. This is just the worst. It's the fucking worst. Corey, hold on. I'm still gonna stick with you. Let's talk about election night. As a strategist, what does election night look like for you? Carter's gave me a little bit of alluding to what election night looks like. Are you, there's many roles that one could have, but give us the broad strokes, right? Like, what are literally thousands of campaigns going to be doing on a micro level on Tuesday night, across the country in their count rooms, in their, candidate speech centers, whatever that looks like. Give us a take of what election night looks like from your vantage point.
It really depends on your individual circumstances, but the broad point that Stephen started us off with, which is you often have very little to do and you start running around and you create big lists of Stephen Carter predicts, thus dooming the North Carolina Republic or the Democrat.
Not dooming. Sorry, doomed. He's already lost. I don't know if we talked about it.
It's not present tense. It's past tense. It's done.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry about that.
Republicans win the Senate with one. They've got on election night.
But so if you are truly done on election day, then that is absolutely the case. But if you are in a campaign where you think there may be legal challenges after, if your job is actually going to bridge into governing itself, perhaps you've been tagged to be the chief of staff or whatnot, then you maybe just start getting a bit ahead of yourself and start thinking about the next thing. And people who win campaigns run on pure adrenaline for the next month. It's annoying, can I tell you, as a former public servant, to deal with people who've just won elections, because they don't sleep. They're so excited about it, and you're tired because you, like everybody else in the world, are not running on adrenaline, and you've just gone through an election where you've got a transition prepped. But
do they crash at some point, by the way?
Yeah, they crash big time, and they start making mistakes, and it's usually when the honeymoon comes off, and it's like, okay, go take a vacation, go to sleep, just reground yourself, because you cannot run this way for 2 years, 4 years, whatever number of years you get for the campaign that you're going to have. But a strategist is a vague role, and it's going to be very different depending on the individual circumstances that you face. But again, right now, you are probably making sure that you're well positioned for whatever fight comes. There are often recounts. It sounds like judicial battles are going to occur this particular election. You're going to want to make sure that you're being strategic about the things your candidate says and does, knowing that they could have an impact on the conversation to come. public relations plays a big deal in this. Public opinion matters. Just look at Bush v. Gore if you want a good example of that, and how the different parties tried to jockey for the moral high ground as things were winding through the courts. But it's also important in a legal sense. You may be shooting yourself in the foot if you make certain concessions at certain times, if you, as a strategist, let your guard down and you acquiesce to certain decisions around vote counting, or when you're talking to the returning officer, you sign off on certain things instead of contesting them and fighting them. On the flip side, if you contest them and fight them, you might be setting yourself up a future challenge, because perhaps you make the assertion at some point, all ballots need to be counted, and it turns out you actually meant only all of the ballots at this precinct, and your opponents start throwing the words back in your face as they try to broaden a recount, as we saw in Bush v. Gore. The Democrats wanted votes recounted in 2 counties, and they said it was really important, and the Republicans said, well, why not all the counties then? Well, the answer is because that wouldn't have been very good for the Democrats. But you've got to be somewhat strategic about this. So if your job is truly strategist, you've got to make sure that you are not closing off options for yourself. You're not shooting yourself in the foot. You're playing a bit of defense, and you're prepping the ground for a bit of offense and for a charge in the days to come if necessary.
Carter, same question to you on the general. What are you looking for on an election night?
Well, I mean, I want to know if I won or not, and that's really hard to do. It's hard to do when you're running a civic campaign and you've got several hundred polling stations coming in, and you don't know, like, how do you know when all the data's coming in, what the data is actually telling you? It gets more complicated when you start dealing with provincial, and even more complicated when you're dealing with, 150 million votes being cast in the United States of America, in highly polarized environments where, one polling district or one county, could come back very, very blue, and the next one's going to come back very, very red. And you need to know, what does that actually mean, without necessarily having every single county, and every single result possible, on a spreadsheet, so that you're able to figure it out. You pick representative places. You want to have a methodology to manage the data. To Corey's point, you don't want to make mistakes, right? So if you're going to concede a state, or if you're going to be in a battle, over the election results, you need to know where you stand very early in the process. We as observers see what happens from the television, right? We see what's happening from the results that are being reported to the general public. A campaign manager or campaign strategist is a good hour ahead of that data. They know exactly what has happened. They know who voted. They know how many people voted. They had scrutineers in the polling stations in the areas that actually matter. They may have picked 15 or 20 representative counties, in certain states that are going to tell them how they're doing. They've got a person who's managing those 15 or 20 counties and bringing the data back to them so that, a comprehensive picture is being written before you have to make a comment on it. Keep in mind that, especially in the U.S., their election nights are constant commentary, right? Everybody is commenting on the results and what it means. And what you don't want is a commentary that starts to go down the road of, well, it looks like, Donald Trump's jumping off to an enormous win, in this state or that state, when, for example, the mail-in ballots haven't been counted, or, there's a particularly blue section of the state that is still to come in. All of that is essential to know, essential to keep all of the spinners on track and aware of, and it has to be managed. And that, for me, was almost always one of my favorite things to do, because knowing how it was going to unfold is, it's a great joy, but it also allows you to actually do the work in the final hours of a campaign. The energy and excitement that Corey spoke of is never more prevalent than it is in those moments when you're starting to see the picture develop that you have either won. Well, when you've won, it's euphoria. And when you've lost, I will concede that the last time we lost, I held on to the faint hope clause well beyond that which was reasonable.
Corey, I'm going to make a pivot here. Let's talk. This has been great because you guys have given me and our listeners a sense of what it's like to be on the inside, perhaps the headspace that many people are in on these campaigns across the United States. Now let's take that knowledge that you guys have as strategists and talk about the specifics in this specific election and what you're looking for, right? So let's move it on to what you might be looking for on this election night, Corey. And let's start with some broad strokes from you. You know, as with this strategist experience, knowing how votes are counted, knowing how things are happening, what are some of the things that you're going to be watching for on election night, and how do you think you're going to get, you know, what are you going to perhaps consume on election night as well?
Well, there's two things that in the early results I'll be watching very carefully. One is those states that do count their mail-in ballots effectively in real time. I'm going to want to see what the splits are, see if there's something common across states that I can glean. All right, Democrats are winning early ballots 6-4 or something to that effect, because that will help me understand the situation in the states that are going to take a few days to understand exactly where their mail-in ballots are. It's the huge story of this campaign. What is going to go on with mail-in ballots? And obviously, if there's a big partisan divide where in person you vote Republican and by ballot you vote Democrat, that makes the likelihood of Trump trying to bluntly steal the election on election night all the more likely. The other big thing I'm going to be watching early, and it has as much to do with time zones as it does the size of the electoral prize, is Florida. Any reasonable path Donald Trump has to victory is through Florida. And if we get the sense relatively early, now relatively early is relative here, I'm not saying as soon as the polls close, that Joe Biden has managed to pull off a victory in Florida, then I don't think it's going to be a long night in a sense. Even if there is some of that ambiguity, that's going to cut against it, because people are going to know that at the end of the day, it's likely Joe Biden's got this election. And I'm going to dig a bit more into it, but the mail-in ballots in that particular state may not skew Democrat, and in person may not skew as Republican as it is the case in other states, just based on the traditions of Florida and how mail-in balloting has been so common for older Floridians for so long there. So I think there's a good chance we'll know what happened in Florida on election night, and if we know Joe Biden won it, this election is effectively over. There's very few paths to victory for Donald Trump if Florida goes blue.
Carter, what's in the Stephen Carter's, strategist guide for observing election night? What are you going to be doing, and how are you going to be doing it?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the spreadsheet that I'm working on right now. I'm trying to figure out what various things mean. Corey's picked on a very obvious, a very important one. Florida goes blue, all of a sudden everything, almost nothing else matters. But I'm also really interested in Georgia, Texas, North Carolina. What's happening right now, and the way that this seems to be lending itself, is that everything is leaning towards it. Not everything, but the swing states are leaning towards the Democrats. So it's going to take like a near sweep of everything, which may sound familiar, because that is the same language that was being used in 2016. It's going to take a near sweep of everything. And then Trump did a near, the sweep of everything, and he wound up getting, winning the election. So I'm going to be watching the states that, are those early states performing as we expect them to? So we will see very early on Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and a little bit later, Texas. You're going to see those, as those starts to develop, then we're really in a place where we can see and understand how the election is. I'll tell you what we're not going to be doing. We're not going to be waiting for Oregon, Washington, or California, right? Like those ones, those ones that are closing at 9 p.m. Mountain, 11 p.m. Eastern. This election's going to be done, I think, prior to us arriving in the Western states. So, I think that's good news for those of us that are producing a live show like Corey and I are doing. Or you, Zain, when you're on CTV. You guys are starting really early, too. You guys are starting at like 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Like, you're going to be on the air for 26 hours.
Yeah, I mean, the first hour is just to read my bio for the people, just to
an in-depth look at Zain Velji's election experience.
Yeah. An inch deep to Zain Velji's story. Corey, question for you. Same question for you, or you wanted to jump in before I jump into a question?
Well, look, I guess the other thing that I'm looking for, but there's not necessarily, or at least I haven't decided yet what that trigger is, the warning sign I'm looking for, is whether the polls are correct. So it'll probably be seeing if there is some sort of systematic error, even in states that, go the way you expect, but maybe not to the intensity. So let's be really clear. If the polls are correct, if polling is correct, I'm not going to say if the polls are correct, but if polling has generally got this and there's not any systemic errors, Biden has this, right? Because if you just assume kind of margin of error, random error, it comes into play in these different cases, it's going to, half of them will be more towards Biden than they should, half to Trump. But the reality is error is not likely going to be random. It's probably going to be in the same direction. And that's what we've got to be looking for early signs of. Because if we understand all of a sudden there's these shy Trump voters, and okay, Biden's won New York, but look at the polls that have come in, and Biden's not winning New York by quite as much as you expected. And obviously that doesn't put New York's electoral votes into question, but it's going to make me very nervous when Pennsylvania starts coming in, when Florida starts coming in, because those are the situations that could potentially be foreshadowing that there is something wrong with polling. Maybe Trump supporters aren't answering polls. Maybe they're lying on polls. Maybe there is a shift in technology. Maybe lower income Americans just are not, picking up the cell phone because they don't want the minutes or whatnot. Whatever it is, if we see some signs that polling has somehow missed, even by a couple of points, that means all of a sudden a 5-point swing state lead could be a 2-point, and then you got a problem. Then you got a problem if you're the Biden campaign.
Corey, I'm going to stick with you for a second. There's a big metric that we talk about on election night, which is voter turnout. In your mind, is that going to be a big one this time around? And do you think it's going to be indicative of something?
I don't know. Look, both sides are so keyed up. It's hard to say where the advantage is right now. The limited data we have is from early voting, and we know that Democrats are more enthusiastic about early voting right now. So it's hard to get. I would be very cautious about drawing any conclusions from the data that we have available, because this is a one of one. We don't have a data set we can look back on and say we expect people will act in this fashion. So voter turnout's going to be huge, almost across the board. But the question is it just both sides really amped up to 11? I mean, when you look at polling on voter enthusiasm, it's not low on the Republican side. I've seen probably as many polls that, and I haven't really looked at voter enthusiasm in a couple of weeks, so I might be working off old data, but Democrat and Republican voter enthusiasm is largely the same, and for many months, Biden's enthusiasm was much lower, right? He wasn't a
softer
candidate that was lighting. Yeah. And even when you saw some of the polling there, it's like, are you definitely going to vote? How excited you are about this candidate? Republicans are not doing badly there. And so when we talk about big turnout, we do generally say that is a sign of a change election. Normally, big turnout means a changing government, but not always. Not always. There's many exceptions to that rule, and we are in deeply irregular times. I'm sure there'll be a ton of conversation about voter turnout. I'm sure if we start seeing that in-person voter turnout is also leaning more democratic than people think, that will be a different conversation. But people always love to talk about it. I sometimes think it's overhyped, overrated.
You scooped one of my questions. I got to burn that question now, Corey. No, that's good. Carter, I want to ask you the same thing. Voter turnout. How are you adding asterisks to voter turnout in terms of how you're viewing it as you see it come across the screen in some of these early Eastern states?
Well, this is where I want to pick some representative or non-representative areas. So, for example, Sumter County in Florida now has gone over 100% of its 2016 vote total already just in their advanced votes. So it was the first county in Florida to go over its 2016 title numbers. It was heavily Trump in 2016. Hillary Clinton only got some 30% of the vote. So less than 1 in 3 voters voted for Hillary Clinton. Virtually the rest went for Trump. So the voter enthusiasm model should hold then, right? Like if this one county stays the exact same, then essentially we can get a very early read on a guess, really, just an estimate of whether or not Biden's voter enthusiasm and Trump's voter enthusiasm have moved simultaneously. However, if Biden jumps even 5%, even a 5% change, Sumter County doesn't matter. Sumter County is not changing the election. But it was such a disadvantaged area. It was such a pro-Trump area. And we're seeing this in Texas. We're seeing this in the Carolinas. We're seeing this in Georgia. And we're seeing this in Florida, where very, very Republican areas are seeing significant jumps in the number of votes that are being cast. That could mean that both the Biden campaigns and the Trump campaigns are surging simultaneously, or it could mean a disproportionate surge for one or the other. And if it's a disproportionate surge for the Democrats, then this is going to be, I think, a very short night. I think that it's going to be, we'll be able to tell from those early counties exactly what's happening. And I'm really excited about that. I'm totally jazzed about picking a couple of really interesting counties that I hope will report relatively early, because Florida also counts early. So they will have the results of their early ballots on election night, theoretically.
So, Carter, what I'm hearing you say, there's a few bellwether counties, so to speak, that the way, if they go a certain way, you're going to start, we've talked about bellwether states, the way they go, we haven't talked about on this show, but in the past, but the way they go, the election goes. So you're looking at bellwether counties, so to speak, and the way they go, the way the state might go. Am I summarizing your perspective correctly?
I'm not necessarily looking for the bellwether implies competitiveness, right? So, and I'm actually looking for something that is disproportionately uncompetitive. Right.
Interesting.
So
okay.
Competitiveness, when you're in a competitive county, you know what gets driven into competitive counties? All the GOTV resources. All the resources of the campaign go into that. I'm imagining both campaigns were able to put into a relatively equal Palm Beach, or we can find something out. I don't know. There's other ones that are closer, 50-50, 60-40. Those ones are going to have disproportionate resources put into them. The ones that are 65-30, no one's putting any resources into them. You see a true measure of real enthusiasm, no torque, no effort, no push. And that's why it's not a bellwether. It's outside of this competitive nature. It's more of if it's going to happen, if it happens there, then it is almost certainly happening everywhere. And that's, it's still a guess. It's a hypothesis, but I think it's a good data point that you can, if you've chosen them in advance and you've chosen them, objectively, or because of some sort of, objective measure, so I'm choosing them based on the areas that have gone over 100% of their 2016 vote in advance polls that can be counted quickly. That's a very small metric, but it's going to give me something that I think I can grab onto.
That's very interesting. I appreciate that, Carter. And by the way, folks, if you're listening and one of those counties have been mentioned, your chosen candidate will lose. So sorry, it's not even the opposite. Just whoever you like will not win. It just, and we're really sorry. We apologize. So I'm glad you only mentioned a couple of them. Corey, let's talk about this concept of bellwether stats or demos. Is there a particular demo that you're looking at? Like, we talk about suburban women, the way they go, the election might go. Is there anything to be said about, looking at some of those early exits, even during the day, perhaps, as to how, certain demographic sets are going thus far?
Well, I'm going to say absolutely not. I've never been that enthusiastic about exit polling. Just the nature of how it's captured does offer an awful lot of room for error to begin with. But when you have an election where there's so many people who have voted in advance, and so the famous story, of course, of Dewey defeats Truman, right? Mm-hmm. Way back. The polling that showed that. The Republican candidate was going to win the election. That was based on a mistake that was made in polling back then. To get responses, what people used to do was, for example, just go to a grocery store and ask the people who are coming into the grocery store in the middle of the day. Now, if you're going to a grocery store in the middle of the day, that says something about your socioeconomic status, that says something about your beliefs. You're going to be effectively skewing Republican, which is exactly what happened, which is why there was such a big polling miss in that particular election in the 40s. Now, the same sort of thing can happen here with exit polling. You're almost making a political statement in many states by voting in person on election day. Not everybody, but by and large, that behavior, we know at this point, at least from polls that have been done of the entire population, is correlated with Republican support. So if you have a bunch of people out there with clipboards on election day asking about your demos and how you vote, that could be seriously skewed at this point. And I certainly wouldn't want to make any predictions about that. I think that would be very dangerous in this election. I think exit polling, perhaps more than any recent election, has the ability to deceive and mislead. And so I'm not going to be putting a ton of stock into exit polling myself.
Carter, same question to you. What do you make of Corey's assessment of exit polling more generally, perhaps, and then maybe more specifically about upcoming Tuesday?
As you know, it pains me always to agree with Corey, but he's totally right. Exit polls are going to be virtually meaningless on this particular election. What's scaring the crap out of me is I'm hearing people talk about doing kind of a bigger, badder, better election poll now, where they're going to be election polling people who are coming out of advanced polling stations and putting them together with people who are leaving regular voting stations in some sort of ability, desire to try and create a actual more comprehensive poll. I think it's exactly the sample structure is wrong. The sample structure does not reflect the nature of the total number of people who are voting in the election, and it's not therefore it can't accurately represent the voting preferences except by accident. So my view is don't lean on any election, exit polling. My advice to the network, and I think we've said this before, our advice to the networks is take your time. There is no rush to call this election on election night. That is a construct that was made by the networks in a bid to try and call their competitors. And it has taken us in a number of different bad places, whether it's Dewey and Truman or if it's Bush v. Gore. Bush v. Gore in Florida was called for both of the candidates and then was left as a toss-up. I mean, these are bad decisions made by people who are trying their best, but let's just wait. We have time. We have all kinds of time. So don't rely on these bad polls.
I think you make a great point, Carter, about the media having a role to play around, the outcome of these calls, too. You talk about Bush v. Gore. There's an episode of The Daily recently. We don't plug other podcasts here, but they made a good episode for the first time. After, of course, their episode where they praised Trump for all the things he accomplished, they made this one where they talked about how, the media's ultimate calling it for Bush on the second go-around in 2000 made Gore look like a sore loser rather than someone who had a real bone to pick with the race that was legitimately a toss-up, right? So the narrative that the media set, maybe inadvertently or naively in their part, actually had a huge outcome of how the public perceived Gore on the heels of that. Corey, you wanted to add something there?
I just wanted to really agree with Stephen on the risk of adding in phone polling plus exit polling. One of the things about exit polling that was kind of nice, even though they still had to make decisions about what polling places they showed up at, what times, they try to be there all day to adjust for some of the things I mentioned, but was you have a pretty strong indication they actually voted, right? Mm-hmm. They've come out of the polls, so your likely voter models are unnecessary. You have, this was a voter. Whenever you are layering in things in polling, like when you're stacking assumptions upon assumptions and you're merging data sets and you're making assumptions, like think about the assumptions that are required when you are combining phone polls plus polling on site. And they've been doing this for years, so I'm not pretending this is the first time they've had to cross this bridge. Mm-hmm. It's not as though people couldn't vote in advance until today. It's just that much more significant. But you call somebody and they say, yes, I already voted and I voted Biden, right? You are assuming not just the representativeness that they're out there, but you're also assuming, yes, they actually did vote. They're not lying to you there. You're also assuming that they are telling you the truth about who they're, like, all of these assumptions exist normally, but when you start stacking in different modes, things get a little scary.
Carter, I have to talk about the elephant in the room in this situation, which I don't even know how to phrase it, but it's the violence. The prediction of violence. And, is there anything with your strategist hat on, and maybe I'll add another element to this, with you watching this coverage, or even with a second screen that is Twitter and social media that you see going on as the undercurrent of the commentary that night, that you might be looking out for that could start signaling, some of this, I don't know, protest, violence, etc. It's such a weird question to ask, but I have to ask it to you from the standpoint of, like, what could perhaps be the justifiable claims, or maybe not even justifiable, but the claims that one side makes to try to generate an alternative sort of story or narrative on election night?
Well, let's start with the beginning. And so as of right now, it's harder to buy ammunition and guns in the United States than it ever has been because there's been a run on them, right? Gun sales have never been higher. Ammunition sales are super high. Walmart has removed guns and ammunition as of today from their stores, not because they don't want to sell them, but because they're afraid that there's going to be violence and looting, and people are going to go for the guns and the ammunition in their stores. So that was reported widely today. So Americans think violence could happen. Americans think that the other side is going to come for them. Now, normally, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to fear people and fear the situation. And as long as there's not a match that is struck that lights up the tinder, then the fire won't start. The problem is that we have a walking match in the White House that could set this off just by simply telling his Proud Boys that it's time to stand up, or telling another group that this is starting to be stolen, or reminding people that hundreds of thousands of ballots have been found with Mark Trump that were thrown out on the side of a road. None of these claims are true, but he's made these claims all the way through. So that is the match that's going to light the fire. And the fire doesn't need to start everywhere at all times at the same time in the same way. The fire could start very smallly in a small way in South Carolina, or in a small way in Florida, or we're already seeing little bits of voter intimidation that are occurring. Little bits, that's okay. Little bit of voter intimidation we're fine with, but large scale voter intimidation on election day with largely armed people, this could be called for in the next 5 days by the sitting president of the United States. And that scares the crap out of me. I don't anticipate, people are talking about civil war, and, we have only one example of a civil war in the United States. And of course, that was two sides, the North versus the South, and there were very simple sides in the way they went forward. There's not going to be that type of civil war in the United States. It's instead going to be many, many small skirmishes. In a perfect world, the small skirmishes will look like one set of protesters protesting another set of protesters with no violence and taking the First Amendment seriously and allowing people the opportunity to say what they need to say. But it very quickly could escalate, especially if people in power call for it to escalate.
Corey, I want to throw out a scenario to you, and I want to get your reaction to what Carter said too, but I want to throw out a scenario. Joe Biden, there's a call on election night. Joe Biden's going to win, right? Is there a backlash for Joe Biden to try to be the healer in chief too early, to try to come out and try to do what he's done his entire 40-plus year career of bringing all sides together? Do you feel like that could stoke the flames even more if Joe Biden's like, okay, I'm going to be a president for all Americans, when one side's really just out there for blood? And I'm not trying to encourage that, but, we know that there's an underbelly of that. So I wanted to maybe throw that hypothetical out to you before getting your thoughts on how you might be watching for, some of these undercurrents on social media and mainstream media on election night.
There's always a way you can screw up that particular approach to politics, where your bridge building actually looks deeply offensive to the other side. I don't think Joe Biden's going to fall into that trap. I certainly think that if it looks like he is going to win the election, if it looks like he has won, and it's just a matter of waiting for ballots to come in some of these states that don't even start processing the absentee ballots until, unfortunately, one of the big swing states, Pennsylvania happens to be in that category, right? But if it looks like Biden's got it, his conversations are not going to be directly, he will probably make some comment to the people along the lines of, now we just need to be patient and wait for the votes, and we need to accept the result no matter what it is, but he won't want to go too far ahead of himself. But the conversations he'll be having are with the Republicans, right? Like, he'll be talking to the leaders in the Senate and the House and saying, okay, guys, we can't destroy our country here. When this is all said and done, I've got this, and we can't let Donald Trump bring us down. And I think that those are the conversations. That's the kind of bridge building he's going to be doing first. The bridge building with kind of the the informed class, right? The people who understand the nuances of absentee ballots, and those who know that when this all goes through the courts, when it's all said and done, even if it was going to make its way to the Supreme Court, people are probably going to be counting ballots along the way. And when it gets, it's very tough. Like, the thing about Bush v. Gore that people need to keep in mind is, like, there was counting and pauses and counting and stuff, and then at a certain point it just was all halted. But, that didn't happen right away. There were still people counting and recounting to a certain point long before it hit the Supreme Court. And if there is more clarity than there was in Florida, it's just going to be done. There's not really any reasonable scenario where people just stop counting votes on election day. Maybe Texas will do some crazy ass shit like that, but most other states, I don't think Texas is going to do that for what it's worth, but most states would not even consider that. So even if Donald Trump says on day one, like, I've won, forget about it. Within a few days, it will be clear that those ballots have come in. And then it becomes, will the Republicans stand by him as he accuses the other side of outright fraud? And I'm skeptical. I remain hopeful that will not be the case. I think that Republicans will not want to go down with Donald Trump. And at a certain point, they'll just say, okay, well, he lost. It's time to move on.
I'm going to ask you guys a final question, maybe leave it on a lighter note, is that suppose you weren't doing a live election show, which you guys are more than certainly doing, from what I hear,
totally
right, Carter?
doing.
Yeah,
Yep,
totally, it's
yeah.
totally happening. How would you be watching this election? I'm really curious about your watching habits. Like, are you doing two screens? Are you flipping networks? Are you trying to find, like, are you like glued into a particular political panel for their insight? Is there a particular type of way you like to get it delivered? Are you doing it the most boring way possible, but like C-SPAN? Like, I'm really curious as to what your media diet for that election day looks like, knowing your past experience on campaigns and kind of what informs maybe some of that. Carter, I'll go to you first.
The coverage with the fewest number of pundits possible would be
How
my
fucking dare you? How
my
dare
choice. Yeah, no, but seriously, I mean,
No. Answer the question.
I'd watch you. You're very experienced, but pundits make me crazy, especially because they're interpreting data very incorrectly. And all due respect to the people on sitting on behind those desks, They don't have all the data, right? Like, you're talking 20% of the time. It's hard to get all of the information that you need to know. So you're responding primarily to the information that the network is giving you, and so watching CNN makes me crazy. Watching Fox is impossible. So I often just use computer screens. I'll often just look up the data that I want to see and do that. And then, of course, as we did in 2016, the texting amongst our little cohorts, right? The three of us texting, when the bile started working up its way up in the back of my throat, that was, I would like to say therapeutic, but Corey did nothing to calm me, nothing at all. So not your job, Corey. I get
Not my job.
Yeah.
Corey, same question for you. If you weren't hosting this this election night special, which is going to happen, what would you be doing on election night? How would you be observing it? How have you observed elections in the past? What's kind of your social media diet look like?
Well, recently it's been, I will usually pick a channel that I consider more middle of the road. Like, I'm not going to watch MSNBC or Fox News most of the time. I will probably watch one of the big networks' coverages, or maybe CNN, although that sometimes is not as satisfying as one hopes. And then I kind of two-screen it. I do what Carter does. I have it open. I'm searching the results myself. I'm following the races I want to, not just waiting for them to come back to me with that data that I want. Usually drinking heavily and eating apple pie. Because, I respect your traditions, America, and I will have an apple pie on election night. Mm-hmm. And then getting feedback and analysis from people I know who know things about these and are watching these things from different angles. Probably not Stephen. I mean, that would be dangerous. That would be misleading. But other people, smart people that I know, I talk to them and I see what's going on. Definitely not going to watch Canadian coverage of a U.S. election. That sounds atrocious. But it's all about processing the data as it comes in. Now, I mentioned I'll watch a median channel. I will at a certain point in the night start flipping to Fox News, to MSNBC, to see how the two warring bubbles are talking about the election and how they see things. In particular, I will be very curious this time as to whether Fox News acquiesces or decides to pick up the president's fight.
That's good insight. We'll leave that segment there and move it on to our final segment, our overrated and our underrated. Guys, are you ready?
I'm always ready. Corey never is.
Yeah, and you're Carter, and I'm going to reward you for that readiness by going to you first. Amy Coney Barrett is officially a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Is her confirmation overrated or underrated for GOP turnout? So the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, overrated or underrated for GOP turnout, Stephen Carter?
Well, I think that the Republican Party has long made the courts a big part of their voter turnout model. For the life of me, I don't know why they did it before the election. Why wouldn't they hang it out there and say we need to keep the Senate and so we can keep Amy Coney Barrett? I just don't understand. It was a ready-made GOTV opportunity, and they've confirmed her. And now I got to think that there's a lot of Republican voters for whom the courts are super important that they get to stay home because they already mission accomplished. COVID canceled. It's all done. Everything's done.
Excellent insight, Carter. So I'm hearing overrated from you. I'm just going to slot you for that. Corey, same question to you. Amy Coney Barrett, now an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Is her confirmation overrated or underrated for GOP turnout in this election?
I don't know how it's rated, but I will say that I don't think that her nomination changes the turnout equation pretty significantly at all. These individual moments that may or may not drive you to the polls matter an awful lot less when everybody is just going to show up at the polls. And we're talking about potential, modern records for turnout here. So whether her being nominated makes them excited or her nomination could have been the carrot that got them to the polls, I think that's just a less significant factor in an election where everybody is keyed up to 11 to begin with.
Corey, I'm going to stick with you. I think I know your answer on this one. Election night panels, a dime a dozen, overrated or underrated?
Well, it depends on who's on the panel. If it's a Corey Hogan type, it's a really important thing to be listening to. If it's a Zain Velji type, just turn it off.
Carter,
go to the bathroom when that comes up.
Carter, are you gonna throw me a bone at all?
I have always watched your television appearances shortly, like a couple of minutes, maybe, sometimes a few seconds, but I always try and catch a little bit just to know what you're up to.
Well, thank you so much. Underrated for both of you on that one. I'm just chalking that one in. Carter, I'm going to stick with you. I asked you this question about a couple of months ago, but I want to ask it to you now. Now that we're in the closing couple of days of the election, the Lincoln Project, their overall impact, their overall message, their overall strategy in this election, overrated or underrated?
I want to say underrated because I think that the Lincoln Project gave the media a narrative that there were Republicans who were prepared to turn on Trump, and you certainly wouldn't have gotten that narrative from the House of Representatives or from the Senate. So having the Lincoln Project allowed that narrative to develop and flourish.
Corey, same question to you. The Lincoln Project reassessed on the just before the election here. Overrated or underrated in your mind?
It's overrated. There are multiple Republican groups doing the same thing. They have been media darlings, obviously. Having George Conway involved when his wife is such a prominent booster of the president has made it for good fodder. But I really doubt they're changing many minds out there. Certainly, I don't think that they're making Republicans more likely to vote against Donald Trump.
Corey, I'm going to stick with you. The Democrats are putting a lot of effort in these last days and last weeks on trying to turn Texas blue as a strategy. For them, is that a distraction? In a sense, could be a distraction? So, is it an overrated or underrated strategy in your mind, from what you're observing, from what the Democrats are trying to do and pour resources and manpower over the last couple of weeks, trying to turn Texas blue? Overrated or underrated?
I think it's overrated. I was looking at some of the House races to see if maybe there was good reason to go there and try to lift some of the downstream races, but there's not that many that are very close. There's not very many toss-ups in Texas. They tend to have cut their borders in a way where you're going to get 70% Democrat or 70% Republican, it feels like, at least when I go through them all. I don't believe the Senate's in play. I think if you're going to win it in a presidential context, you've already won everything anyhow. Like, it just, to me, doesn't see. Like, I feel like I remember Hillary Clinton taking similar swings in the closeout of 2016, and I feel like we all know how that turned out, and we regret it. There are states that are more likely to be tipping point states, and I don't think Texas is very high on anybody's list of tipping point states. I would much rather the Biden campaign was focusing its efforts on the Midwest and on Pennsylvania, which may or may not be part of the Midwest. Who can say?
Stephen Carter, in your heavy breathing, you have something to say. Turning Texas blue as a Democratic strategy, overrated, like Corey says, or underrated?
Underrated, and I'm just so glad that I'm able to return to my natural positioning of opposing everything that Corey says. There's a whole bunch at stake in Texas. I mean, the state house is close. The Senate race is there. I don't think they're going to win the Senate. I agree with Corey, but I do think that they have a chance of winning the 34 electoral votes. It's a significant number of electoral votes. It changes the math. It changes the math moving forward. This is the path that Texas is moving towards. It's getting closer and closer every cycle. And if you can keep Texas in the Democratic cycle, on the Democratic side, the Republicans actually have to change who they are. If you can, and that has to happen. It has to be fundamentally a different party, because you want a good democracy. You just don't want a good Democratic Party. That doesn't work very well. But I think that bringing in Texas into the blue side is a fantastic goal that just would seal this election.
Carter, I'm going to stick with you for our final question on You, the People, before the election. And it's a very simple one. We've heard a lot about there may not be a winner on election night. So having a winner on election night, is that overrated or is that underrated?
Oh boy, I think it's underrated. I think it would be fantastic to have a winner on election night. I think that certainty would go a long ways towards quelling any upset in the nation. Even if it's certain, like if it's a Biden alliance, like if he wins Georgia and Florida and Texas, and it's just very clear that there's no path for Trump, then I think that everybody just goes back to their corners and licks their wounds. And I think that would be very healing for the country. If it's close and there is no victor on election night, I think it's going to be, because if it's Trump on election night, it'll be tight. There's no way he wins in a landslide on election night. So it wouldn't be very healing. I'm really looking forward to something that's healing.
Corey, same question to you. Having a winner on election night, and by which I mean a presidential winner on election night, overrated or underrated?
Well, it's overrated from a process point of view. What does it matter? You don't actually confirm these people. They don't get sworn in, I guess, for at least a month and change on the House and the Senate and the President. They come a bit later. So in that sense, what's the rush? But I do think we have taken for granted how nice it is to have a clear victory on election night. Now, I don't know. I remember 2000. It's not something that we get all the time. We are often talking about votes that are lagging behind. Let's not forget also, even Bush's reelection in 2004, it came down to Ohio, and I think we had a pretty clear indication on election night. But these things, we tend to remember them being more clear cut. We put on our rose-tinted glasses. There's often some question, will outstanding ballots change this question? So I wouldn't want to overstate it either. It's a nice to have. I can't believe Americans are now falling into this trap that it's a need to have.
Guys, I lied to you. I have one more question, Corey. I won't be needing you for it. Stephen Carter, will we have a winner on election night?
No.
Corey, we will be having an overrated winner on election night, according to you.
Thank God.
I'm so glad. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Carter. We'll leave it there. That's You, the People, for this week. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next time.